the first place we need to start, and again, which I think is often forgotten, is that it should be familiar, obviously a number of strength and conditioning coaches in the room, is we need to develop a system. And to help us do that, and this was a bit of work led by Lewis Howe, who sat in the front here, he put together a great system, but it's built on the foundation that we do a thorough needs analysis, okay? To obviously clearly characterize the movement demands of the sport and also obviously the injury demands. So what we first need to do is establish the injury risk and obviously decipher what are the most pertinent injuries. And I'm not just talking about the little bumps and bruises, I'm talking about the severe injuries, the one that have the biggest time cost. Okay, because, all right, these guys aren't professional athletes, but what they are is developmental athletes. So weeks and months lost is obviously key time during key growth and development periods where they could obviously be working on their technical skills and obviously in our case working on their physical development. So we need this system so that we can first establish the injury risk, identify the mechanisms of those injuries, design a relevant test battery based on these factors, not just using DFMS or whatever movement screen is in vogue, and that's not to detriment to those screens. It's just, okay, let's have a reason why we're selecting this test. Implement our training intervention, and then most importantly, retest. Okay, just to keep us honest, just to check the validity of our work. So, in designing my screen, obviously, as part of my PhD process, we had to look to the literature, of which there was very, very few papers actually published in terms of UK-based youth soccer players, and actually this is the only audit that was available at that point in time. So it was published in 2004 by Price, but the actual data capture period was between 1999 and 2001. And now obviously I started collecting this data in 2014, so there's quite a long time period there. But also what is probably worth me looking at in a little bit more detail is the fact that since this audit was published, the Premier League put in a system called the Elite Player Performance Pathway, and what that did is had a significant increase in the number of contact hours required to maintain certain categories of status, so category 1, 2, 3, for example. And that was obviously just specifically for soccer contact hours, not S&C, not any things outside of that. Now, I know a lot of the clubs didn't adopt this system, and I think the regulations are changing slightly. But obviously, if you massively increase the number of contact hours, potentially that may have a change on what the injury audit looks like. So that's what we did, and we published the details in this paper in the Journal of Sports Science. Now, I'm not going to go through all the findings, but some of the key things just to allow you to understand why we selected some of these screens, I'm just going to go through quickly. So in terms of what the most prevalent injuries were, our most prevalent injury was a knee injury, okay? Followed by an ankle. Now that somewhat surprised me. Potentially I thought muscle injuries might have trumped that. But that was what we saw from the data set, okay? And that was collected from 8 clubs. So obviously not the full cohort of academy soccer clubs, but it's a decent sample. In terms of muscle injuries, it wasn't hamstrings that was our most prevalent, it was actually our quadricep injuries, okay? And again, linking back to that increase in contact hours, there may be a growth training load interaction there because that actually peaked, the incidence of quad injuries actually peaked in the U15 players. So they've obviously gone through a period of rapid growth, where there's developmental lags in terms of bone length change, muscle length change, followed finally by cross-sectional area, so that may have contributed to that in some way, shape or form. And also foot injuries accounted for around 7%, okay? Interestingly as well, 62% of the injuries were non-contact in their mechanism. So obviously, injuries are not preventable completely, injuries are always going to happen, but we've got a better chance at preventing these non-contact injuries.